Another episode of Milk Crate Moments. Today, my guest, Wendy Thompson, is here to talk a little bit about um, when we talked about what her Milk Crate moment was. um, I'm going to let her tell the story, but I'm just wondering how many of you have ever been told you're either fired or you're going to have to take a pay cut, a demotion and a pay cut. I am sure that happens. I'm sure it happened in the pandemic. I'm sure it's happening now in this kind of economy. And what did you say? Did you go along with it? Did you like, okay, right? That might be what you've decided to say because you knew you wanted to keep a job that you had, rather, and then while you looked for another one. But Wendy has a different take on that. And Wendy, I don't want to spoil it because it's such a great story. So, first of all, welcome to Milk Crate Moments.
Thank you so much, Sheen. Glad
You're
to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here. So let's dive right in because I think Milk Crate Moments are, again, inspirational, educational, and motivational, hopefully to the viewer. And I'm sure that there's been people in a position. I'm going to let you start at the beginning of your story, but I'm sure there's been people in the position that you were in. And I wanted them to know how you handled this.
All right. So, I mean, where do you begin? I mean, there's so much. I mean, just really to really start off, just like everybody else, and I'm sure they can relate, is, when you're a kid, you're told, get good grades so you can get a good school, get into a good school so you can get, so you can get a good job. And, and then make sure that when you get your good job, you pay your bills and you save, and then whatever you have left over, have some fun. And, that could mean like a Mountain Dew and a large size, Snickers bar, who knows, right?
Who knows?
And so, naturally, going to university, going for a completely different industry, which was graphic design, and found out that the piece of paper I had was a very expensive piece of paper because my industry was saturated by the time I graduated. Naturally led me into the liquor business. So I was in
So wait
the
a
one.
minute. So graphic design.
Yeah.
You're like, no job for graphic design. Let's go get drunk. Is that what I just heard?
Well, actually, ironically, I went to one of the biggest party schools and I didn't drink when I was in college, which I know seems really strange, And so, when I would actually run into people and they're like, what are you doing now?" I'm like, "Oh, I work for the spirits and wine and spirits industry." And they're like, "Wait, what?" so, which is just funny in itself, and
Mm.
it's ironic how life takes you. And so when I got into the wine and spirits industry, um, you know, it was just happened to be I met someone else and they said, "Come on in." And I said, "All right." So I got interviewed by two gentlemen and then I turned around and interviewed them. And so it was a really good beginning start.
Awesome. So now you were into the wine and spirits for, let's just call it liquor. It's so much easier.
Yeah, I will
And
say liquor.
it,
Okay.
it sounds like a big girl word, right? Liquor. So you're in the liquor industry for 17 years.
Actually longer than that, 20.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's start the story then. What happened that led to a um, your boss wanting to demote you and give you a big old fat pay cut?
Well, that was actually at the 17th year mark. So,
Okay.
yes. And so, just like any other day, I would be called in, and I always knew that I was going to be doing some other special project. And so, ironically, I walk in, and it seemed a little odd. And he slipped a piece of paper across the table, face down, and said, "This will be good for you." And I'm like, "Well, this isn't how these meetings start. So, what does he mean? This will be good for me?" And so, along with that, he had just gotten back from a
Wait a
trip.
minute. What are you going to tell us what's on the paper, or is that coming?
Well, that's coming. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
So, but I just want to earmark the fact that he had just got back from Turks and Caicos, which is a incentive trip that myself and my colleagues got to send him on because of our numbers.
Okay. Awesome. So you were a pretty
Yeah.
good salesperson there.
I did pretty good for myself. Now, of course, sometimes that's up for subjective mind, but yeah, the numbers speak for themselves. Numbers are facts. So, along that way, he just basically said, "Well, I really can't get into, all the details, but we're going to have to demote you." And at this point, I'm a key account manager, so I'm responsible for 27 different restaurant chains and so on and so forth in the Chicagoland market. And so, as you can imagine, it's just all over the place and a lot of windshield time. And so I was like, demote. I'm like, so I asked him, I said, well, what did I do? And he's like, well, I really can't get into that. But the West Wing, which is, C-suite, they said, we got to move fast. And, but this will be good for you. I promise it'll be good for you. And I'm like, doesn't sound good for me. Like, I'm just trying to I was still just awestruck and didn't really know what to say. And, and he said that, that he's going to need a decision. And I said, well, considering that, this is a complete shock to me, can I have a few days? And he simply said to me that, well, yes, you can have a couple days, but I can't guarantee that if you don't make the right decision, that you'll still have a job.
Okay.
And I was like,
What was the right decision in his mind?
apparently to take the demotion.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yes. So, just like anybody else, I went home and I was like, I had my ping pong moment. And I call it the ping pong moment because you're on one hand, you're like, you know what? I don't know what it is. I don't know, I'll just take the demotion. We'll make nicey and I'll keep my job. And on the other flip side, I'm like, wait a minute. I work 80 to 90 hours a week. And I want to know what I did wrong so that I don't do it again. And then also, like, what is going on? Like, what did happen? And so I had gotten a phone call from an anonymous source and had asked me, do you want to know why you're getting demoted? I'm like, yes. And he goes, do you remember so and so? And I said, yes. And he said, well, that person left our division, found out that the grass wasn't greener on the other side and wanted back in our division. And our boss is making room for him with your job.
Oh, nice.
I was like, okay. And thank you. And we never had this conversation. I felt like a secret spy at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. I said, well, this person basically said, good luck. And I'm like, I'm going to need it. And, because I knew that what I was up against,
Yeah.
and we were unionized and so on and so forth. And there was a lot of incestuous connections within this industry. And as much as I loved the industry and I learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for it, and I met a lot of wonderful people, but I felt like I was fighting for my life at this point. And so, well, actually, I'm like, okay, I had it all rehearsed in my mind. I'm like, all right, you know what, Wendy, we'll figure it out. Well, then I did the calculations of my new salary. I would be taking a $20,000 pay cut, and that wasn't discussed at all. And I
Oh,
was like, when in life, when you have a certain amount of money you make, your lifestyle kind of creeps up and is around the same. And I just told myself, you know what, it's better to have a job because at that point I had my own place, So I was like, the modern day slave because the more debt you get in, the more you got to keep the job, right? And so, there was a lot of fear that was, fueling my decision. And so, what I was thinking, I'm like, just do it and you'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So that Friday, I walk into his office and I didn't even say anything at first. He talked first and he said, I don't know what you're worried about, Wendy. It's just, it's just a title change.
mm,
And then all of a sudden something snapped. And I said, you know what? It's not just a title change because actually you're not giving me the same pay. So I've got a proposal for you. How about we start fresh? And if I make the same mistakes, that you bring them to my attention so they're I can correct them, and two, I can learn from them. And if I make a multitude of mistakes, as you've so-called claimed, then we can have this conversation again. Okay? Okay. Oh, look at the time. You know what? I got to go. I got to get back to the clients. I'll talk to you later. And I walked right out of his office and I was like, oh my goodness, what did I just do? Because I knew his wrath. I've seen him. Him in action before, and I was like, "What's going to happen next?" And for approximately 7 months, came after me with everything to try to get me fired, try to get me written up, this, that, and the other. And everybody else didn't. I felt like I was on an island by myself, and so I just fought it and fought it and fought it. And I secretly had a little bit of help, a little bit of support behind the scenes, but for the most part, I really was out there on the front line. And I will say that you get under that amount of stress, and if you don't have somebody to support you, like Craig's been an amazing support to me through that whole entire thing. And I
let's
don't know
talk
if it,
about who Craig is. We don't know
Craig
who.
is my fiance,
Okay.
otherwise known as my husband, because I'm sure we've hit 7-year common law marriage. But anyway,
Okay.
uh, and my health started to decline. I literally, not to be too much information, but I started losing my hair. Like I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and over time, you want to throw in the towel. But there was just something that stuck inside of me, was the principle, the integrity behind it. And all of a sudden, one day, the the um, the war kind of stopped abruptly. My key card still worked, and I still was collecting a paycheck.
Were
And
you,
so
did
then,
you get the pay cut?
nope, I still had my position, and I was the only female in the management team, so I was the only female in the room, and I would have meetings like this. Well, tell Wendy she's got to do this, 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 and this, and that went on for a long time, like as
Mm,
if I wasn't even in the room.
yeah.
And the industry that I came from was, how I explain it is kind of like corporate America meets Wild Wild West, meets the boys club, meets the mafia. And I kid you not, there's no exaggeration there. And like I said, a lot of amazing experiences. But when I sat in that boardroom and just was treated like I didn't even exist, I was like, there's got to be something better.
Yeah.
So then through a friend, I got introduced to the financial services industry, but I came in as a client first because I'm like, you know what? They told us that because we were unionized, we have the best benefits. Well, I'm here to tell everybody that if you're not going anywhere, you're not going to, what are you going to compare that to? How do you know? And
Right.
in the industry that I came from, you either left in a box, you retired, or you got fired. It was unheard of that people actually ever just left the industry.
Mm.
So through this introduction into the industry, or into the new industry that I became part of, I was a client first, and they were talking to me about asking me questions nobody ever asked me before. What was important to me? Did I know if I had enough money for retirement? And I'm like, well, I should. I got a pension and a 401k, and I got all these great benefits. And then when they broke down the numbers, I realized that I was going to be shortchanged big time.
Wow.
And the biggest question that it was asked was, if you thought all this time that you were doing right, and the second you found out you weren't, when would you want to know? And that really stuck with me. And he's like, you know what? Based on your questions and your answers, I'm gonna share with you. Give me a week, and I'm gonna show you what I have planned for you. And by looking at your numbers, I should be able to pull $200 out of here without creating a bill. And I'm like, well, there's one thing I did remember learning from school was how to balance a checkbook. And I was like, I don't know where he's going to get these $200, and I'm going to wait to tell him I told you so. And so a week later, we meet up, and he explains to me two different, options. And so that way I can make the decision. And he goes, oh, by the way, I found $468 out of what you have here. And I'm like, what? And he goes, you sound mad. I go, I am mad. He goes, why are you mad? I go, because I look at my numbers every week. I don't find $468. And how did you find that? And I go, how'd you do that? And he goes, well, and he explained. And really the bottom line was, he says, well, how about this? If I teach you everything that I know, will you share it with other people? And I said, absolutely. He goes, well, how about you come on board part-time? And I don't know what part-time is, considering I was already working 80 to 90 hours a week. But I'm like, sure, let's do it. And he's like, I'll teach you everything that I know. And that's actually how I got into the financial services industry. And yeah,
Well,
and then
I find it really interesting that you said no to a demotion and a pay cut. And and I guess that he had to go along with it because he had to know the fact that he didn't want to discuss why they were going to do that for you. Couldn't get into the details. Um, told you that he wasn't doing anything above board, right? And then you knew what the secret was, wanting to bring a buddy back and give him a job, and couldn't do that if you were taking all of the good clients.
well, there, yeah.
If you already had all the good clients, you were gonna have to give some of those up, and I guess he could have justified that. But I just find it interesting because I think a lot of women, Wendy, would have just gone along with it, and they would have just accepted, either, a demotion and a pay cut while they and then got mad and looked for something else, but you didn't. You literally said, "No, thank you," to a demotion. No, thank
Well,
you.
I definitely, support is huge. One thing I can say is that because I'd already been working for the same boss for, going on 17 years. and I had already said yes to a lot of things before. So I could really relate with what you're saying, as far as, being female in a dominated industry. And I never really let that be a problem. I just knew where the cards laid, and I just knew what I needed to do. But I did get to the point, it was that milk crate moment where I could do what I've always done, and that's been a yes person and just taking it on the chin, and then going this way and taking it on the chin. And I got sick and tired of being that person,
Yeah.
and it was also coming to terms with, when I was in that boardroom for countless meetings. We'd have meetings for the meeting of the meeting, and it
Yeah.
was ridiculous. Um, you know, the along those lines, I also felt genderless, and in which I find is a really interesting thing, because that was a while ago. That was before that became a huge topic today. And
Mhm.
what I mean by genderless, meaning that I couldn't be too feminine, because the guys wouldn't want. They were specific on what they would talk about in front of me, but
Right.
then I couldn't be one of the guys, because it's very obvious that I'm not one of the guys. And so it was like I literally actually brought in a sparkly pink mouse for my laptop, just so I could have a little bit of like connection and femininity, or at least remind them that I'm still a woman.
Okay. That's funny,
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting that he was willing to, because you were a woman. I doubt that he would have done that with a man, right?
Yes.
He would have tried to give him a promotion and a pay cut so he could bring a friend on, or a former colleague back into this industry. So,
Yes.
well, I'm
Yes.
super proud of you for saying no thank you to a demotion and no thank you to a pay cut, and you got it, right? No, and they did, but I understand that you had to face some of the whiplash around that, meaning that he was not going to, let it go easily, right? He was gonna
Well,
make you miserable.
right, and it was definitely it felt like forever, and it was a hard decision to make. And I would be more than happy to share the actual winning results, when you really stick to your guns, you stick, and where I'm at today. If I wouldn't have chosen that path, I probably would still be there, and i wouldn't
Mhm.
have i wouldn't have become an agency owner. I wouldn't have been able to help the thousands of families that I've been able to help, along with the wonderful people that I work with, that I sideline with, and that are my colleagues. And so,
Well, let's talk about that for just a couple minutes,
okay.
right? So, you're in the financial services now,
Yes.
right? You figured out how to get your own, financial, what's the word I'm looking for? Your own financial house in order, right?
Yes.
And then you started helping other people. How long did it take after you started doing that? Did it take you to leave the, the liquor industry?
So when everything hit the fan, I, was part time, learning as much as I could. It was really, a lot of times people say that they're busy. Well, at the time, I had my house up for sale. We were merging houses. I also was producing a show, which is a whole nother conversation, and working in the liquor industry during the holidays. And so that was the beginning. And so I just made sure, sometimes you have to be in enough pain to really make things work, and be motivated. And so that I just did as much as I could, and I just did it in increments. I bet you, if I didn't have so much distraction and whatnot, I probably would have done it sooner. So 4 years later, I
Wow.
literally came into my boss's office and said, "Hey, I'm leaving." And he's like, "Where are you going on vacation?" And I said, "I'm going on a permanent vacation. I'm actually firing you as my boss. I no longer need your services." And I had been dreaming about that for 4 years, where I was going to have this limo, and I was going to do all these things, and I was going to pin mistletoe to the back of my pants as I was walking out the door, because I was pretty sure he was going to be happy, and, like, told me to leave. But he actually asked me to stay longer. And I,
And
that's
did
a, yeah, well, I stayed until, well, he also brought in someone else to be my boss as well. And that particular person said, "Oh no, oh no, we're going to have you out by the ninth. Your sheet says the ninth. We're going to have you out by the ninth." So, so it was a very interesting, eventually I'm going to have a movie and a book. Just because I feel that, whatever I went through, if I can encourage anyone else, or help someone else go through what they're currently going through, or making that choice, that would be amazing. So yeah, so
so, Wendy, who's gonna play you in the movie?
Maybe myself. I'll play myself.
Well,
Um,
let's talk about that for just a hot minute too, because
yeah.
Wendy's actually an actress, right? What,
Yes.
what else are you? I know you go by the Atomic Blonde, but what else? What else do you do in the entertainment field?
So, sing, dance, act. So I've impersonated, uh, people like Britney, Marilyn, Madonna, uh, Lady Gaga, uh,
Interesting.
Mrs. Claus, Betty Boop, Jessica Rabbit, just you name it. Oh, Liza Minnelli. I just recently did Liza Minnelli this year. This next year, I've been asked to do Shania Twain. So, I mean, the list goes on. And I have a lot of fun creating that, but making sure that it's not just someone dressing up as that, um, and being able to sing with the Chicago Rat Pack. I mean, there's just that opened up doors for a lot of other things, and then eventually, what I ended up doing was becoming a producer because
Oh,
I met a lot of other wonderful, amazing, talented actors and actresses, and I just was so motivated to make sure that they stayed working. And
yeah.
so we've done a lot of charity events. And this last weekend, this was near and dear to my heart. About over 12 years ago, I was supposed to go. I got approved to go overseas to perform USO, and I was so excited. My parents, my dad, a bunch of my family members are all veterans, and I figured this would be a way for me to serve,
Good.
especially for the people that give us the opportunity to have the freedom to do what we want in life.
Yeah.
And so, uh, 4 weeks later, we got canceled because they knew they were going to be going through a heavy artillery fire. And so, ironically, earlier this summer, a friends of mine who opened up a theater had asked me. They're saying, "Hey, we're doing a veteran show. Would you like to be a part of it?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so I envisioned being a pinup girl along with two others. So it was a blonde, brunette, and a redhead, and that we were going to do World War II songs, of that era. And so we did Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy and the Company Beat over there, and Rosie the Riveter, and so then they told me who I was going to be sharing the stage with, and this gentleman was the gentleman that I was supposed to go overseas with. And I was so excited. I was like, wow, we finally get to share the stage. And so this last Saturday for Veterans Day, in honor of veterans, along with a really good friend of mine who is going to be stepping in as president for the Fisher House of Chicago, Friends of Illinois Fisher House, which is like the Ronald McDonald House, but for veterans, was part of that as a fundraiser. And just being able to put all that stuff together, that's where like I have a lot of passion for a lot of things. But if I wouldn't have made the choices that I made, and and becoming once I jumped off the cliff, a friend of mine told me that, you'll be building your wings on the way down. And I did that. And I'm happy to say, aside from, the impersonation, I became an agency owner 6 months later.
Oh, that's
And I
fantastic.
haven't had to look back, and then it's given me the freedom to still, perform, still produce shows, obviously keeping everything very professional, but I really get to truly help families and businesses and individuals really protect what's most important to them. And so it just really, along with doing charity work, I was like, wow, I can make really good money, but it doesn't come out of my client's pocket, and I can get paid very, very well for doing it, and like just have the best of both worlds.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, you have such an interesting story. So I'm going to invite you to come back sometime and let's talk about the milk crate moments around your acting career. Can we do
Okay,
another?
great. Yeah, that would be wonderful. I would
I,
love that.
I love it. Wendy, so the one thing I always ask people at the end is what is one piece of advice you would give to an entrepreneur who might be going through a milk crate moment of their own?
Well, I would say remember rule number 1, don't quit. And then rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. And then last but not least, if you head in the same direction long enough, you will get to the destination that you desire
If you don't quit, right?
if you don't quit.
I love it. Wendy, thank you so much for being here today. This was so great. I loved the story. I love the fact that you stood up for yourself and said no, thank you, and probably didn't say no, thank you. But my point is, you stood up for yourself, and every woman needs to have a little bit of that in her, so that or know how to do that, right? To stand up for herself. And I could share stories and stories and stories with you about how I didn't find that until I was in my 40s. So,
Well, Jean, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to be here with you. And I just want to say to everybody out in the audience, you really need to get time with Jean. Let me just say, with what she does is just absolutely in the connections and just the heart that she has. I just have to say that because I'm so blessed and grateful for you.
thank you, Wendy, and thank you for being here. And I can't wait to have you back. So, we'll talk again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.